All right, everybody, welcome to Follow Up Boss Office Hours. I'm here today with Caroline Becker. How are you, Caroline?
I am great. Thank you for having me today on Office Hours.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to diving in. So, I love this idea. And I know, Caroline, we were talking about a topic, and we thought it would be smart to just really dial back to the true fundamental pieces of Follow Up Boss. Because I think sometimes we get really excited about all the things we can do and the integrations, and you can customize all this stuff. Um, but sometimes just using the key things in a very intentional way um, can be the right thing. So
Right. And, use those as building blocks for everything else. So we'll make sure we have, a very sturdy foundation to build on all those other cool add ons.
exactly. So we're going to dive right in here in just a second. But before we do, I just wanted to mention FubCon, Follow Boss's first in-person big live conference event. It's going to be in Las Vegas at the Cosmopolitan, November 8 to 10. It's possible that my birthday is somewhere in that time frame. So come to Vegas and hang out for my birthday.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be singing happy birthday to Lee. But yeah, it's going to be a great time. We're really excited. There's going to be a lot of content for everyone. So whether you're, like a team lead, if you're an agent on a team, we're going to have tons of sessions and breakouts for, everyone, so that everyone's, getting the most out of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's going to be a focus obviously on systems, focus on operations, focus on marketing. People I'm talking to, I'm encouraging them to bring staff and even team members. A lot of times for these conferences, I say, don't bring those guys. You come learn and then go and disseminate it. But I really feel solid. This is going to be a for everyone type of event. So I'm super excited, Caroline. I know you and I will both be there. People can
Mhm.
come do live office hours with us.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Very good. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in to the session. I do have a quick link I'm going to drop in the chat for Follow Up BusCon for FubCon registration. For some reason, it's not letting me copy it, so I'm just snagging it right now. So I'll drop that in the chat. If you guys have questions, if you could try to drop them in the Q&A, makes it a little bit easier for us to make sure we answer them. Or if we say, hey, we're going to get to that, it helps us keep them organized. So definitely appreciate you guys using the Q&A where you can. So I just dropped the link in there, except it went only to hosts and panelists. So there we go. Think I know how to Zoom by now, but all right, cool. So at a high level, Caroline, I know we kind of already covered this, but just the idea of these key features um, all feed things like reporting and smart lists and just the way to use it. What are some of those just key areas that we're going to focus on today?
Yeah, so for today, I think we're going to focus on our stages. We can talk about tags. Those are things that are just very key to keeping your database organized and letting you, as Lee said, like build up these additional things like smart lists or automation. So we'll definitely touch on stages and tags. And then we'll also get into sources and appointments. And as Lee mentioned, those are really great. They feed into reporting. And yeah, if we have some time, we can even jump into deals and reporting to see, where that all funnels into.
Awesome. And I think we're going to try to tackle at the end too a little bit of best practices around both documenting these systems as well as training and kind of dispersing them to the team, because it's great to have a plan. It's even better to have that plan written down. But if nobody is following it or knows what it is, then
Yeah,
maybe it's not a
exactly.
plan. So let's talk about stages first. And we may jump into screen share, we may not, but at a high level, what do stages do, Caroline?
Yeah, so stages are going to be, I always say it's your first level of categorization when it comes to your database. So they are customizable, but what we see, what works best is really that these are descriptive of where the person is in their journey with you. So like you maybe even say like it's like where they're at in the pipeline. And when it, like I said, they are customizable, but what's most important is that they like have a meaning to you and to your team. I think that's like what's key. Like sometimes we see accounts that have like 50 stages and they all are kind of the same. But yeah, what's most important is that they just have a meaning to you guys internally.
Awesome. Yeah. And again, we'll get to documenting some of that, but just having a written definition of your stages is definitely key. I mean, lead and closed, you can't modify, but even within that, just defining the lead stage exactly. My personal recommendation is to use the lead stage kind of as a we haven't connected yet. Doesn't mean we haven't tried. But to me, lead basically means like, how do we get people out of lead?
Hmm.
So obviously by contacting them, getting them, figuring out their time frame, whatever that is. But just because you reached out or because they're on an action plan that sent something, I don't think you can recategorize them from there. That said, I don't think anybody should sit and lead for more than 30 or 45 days, just because at that point, if they haven't responded, that's going to be a different touch, a long-term nurture, or put them in a pond, whatever your strategy is. But yeah, again, just defining them for your personal use and your personal business model is definitely key.
Exactly. And yeah, like you said, like lead is the default. So, if you're looking at your stages list and you have a bunch of people sitting in the stage of lead, that kind of means they're uncategorized. So that's like a really good place to start. And it might be an indicator to you if you're a team lead or admin, if you see a bunch of people sitting in lead, that might mean that, agents aren't sure where to move them after that. So that could be a good indicator for you to like, let's go through these stages. Let's give them a definition. And if you're an agent on a team and you're looking at the drop down of stages on your lead profile and you're not sure, that's a great time to reach out to an admin. And maybe if your team doesn't have that kind of SOP behind these stages, at least start tracking one internally. So where, if you're moving it to XYZ, that what that means for you at least.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's a great idea. Just at the very worst, come up with your own kind of personal use, category. Another thing I recommend for people a lot is having some sort of what I would call a default stage, whether that's a long-term nurture, or some people use something like contact for this. Um, I've seen all kinds of different stuff. People use watch. Some people use like words I never would have ever come up with. But again, if it means something to them or they have it internally defined, but I think it's really important for, again, if you're running a company for sure, that agents understand that they can, if you don't know what to do, put it in long-term nurture or put it in contact or whatever that is for you. But just having that kind of like, if you aren't sure what to do, put it in this one, I think is really helpful and helps get people out of lead.
Yeah, exactly. And, we'll kind of get into it, but this is where like all of your power for your smart list starts with stages. So again, if everything's categorized the same as lead, you're just not going to be able to power these lists and additional things as you go.
Cool. Yeah, I'm with that, Caroline. So yeah, I'm trying to fix the chat thing too.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that makes good sense. And one other quick thing on stages, and then let's move on. As the owner level account in Follow Up Boss, there's an owner level, which is only can be one, generally the person that started the account. There are admin who have access to various additional things, and then of course agents. There's a few other options depending on your level, your account level. But I just wanted to reference to the idea that you can order these stages. The owner account can order the stages. And I always also really encourage people to try to order them in a way that makes sense. So like you're moving them from, hot to lead to whatever kind of that flow is. And then similarly, if you have other stages, like if you have recruiting stages or something like that, these are global always. But if you have certain stages that maybe you use or your marketing team or your TC uses, you can consider moving those to the bottom just so that the agents don't constantly have to scroll through an irrelevant stage. Make it easy for them to say, oh, this one's hot, this one's warm, this one's nurture. Like I love the order you just did there, Caroline. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I like that you touched on like ordering these because this is where it shows up. So if when your agents are on a profile and their lead and they know that the next thing should be this or like it makes a lot of sense visually once you're on the profile. So I think that that's definitely something to consider. If these are all out of order, definitely reorder them.
Awesome. And that's under stage admin,
Hmm.
or admin stages.
Yeah.
Close enough. All right, perfect. So let's where are we headed next? We can talk about tags a little bit.
Yeah, I thought we could touch on tags because that is basically, stages is that first level of categorization. Tags is really the next piece. So, think stage first, tags second. And, you use tags on top of your stages to further segment your contacts. So, when you're building out these different smart lists, you can have people, let's say they're in your hot prospect stage, but then you've tagged them buyer or you've tagged them seller or potentially you've even tagged them with like a zip code or maybe waterfront, something along those lines. So that way you can build out these like very detailed descriptive lists. So that, that's where you can really start to power the smart list. You can do a call list for those people. You can send a batch email. And, when you've segmented them together, you can more easily push out, very valuable content to them.
Yeah, and I want to just reiterate what you said, Caroline. I think a lot of people in the business are familiar with that term as reverse prospecting, the ability to go in and find people already in your system who meet certain criteria. So, for example, if you had a new, I love the waterfront example. If you're tagging people waterfront because they're looking for something waterfront, and you have a listing that comes along that's waterfront, you can easily click on that tag, find everybody that inquired or is interested in waterfront and say, hey, we got this great new listing. You want to check it out? Would you like some more information, more pictures? And that goes for anything. I mean, it could be a zip code even. Hey, we got a new listing in this zip code you inquired on. Even if it was 2 years ago, it's a solid touch. I mean, worst case, they unsubscribe or tell you they already bought a house and then, move them to long-term nurture.
Exactly. And tags are different than stages. Like with stages, I mentioned earlier, it's good to keep it simple and like have definitions for these things. Tags are a little bit different. So anyone can add tags. You can continue adding tags. There's no such thing as too many tags. I think, try to have some sort of standardization, but there's really no trouble in adding tags. So if it feels right to add a tag, you can always go back and remove it. Or if you're looking, there's only one person in your database with a tag, sure, go ahead and delete that. But if you start adding tags, when your agents go to add a tag to someone, they're going to see the other tags in the account, and it might kind of spark with them like, oh, I should be adding tags and further categorizing these. And that's what's really going to power your database.
Yeah, and back to the documenting just for a quick second. I think documenting that in a very simple way is actually something I talked about at the Level Up event in Atlanta. It's like documenting some key areas like that so people understand. Like, for example, a lot of people will power their newsletter by a tag. And so you can set up lead flows when people come in to add it automatically to certain types. Maybe you want to manually add people to a newsletter. But things like that, where you just have a core best practice that's like, hey, if this person, does this, this, and this, or if they're from this particular source, we want to add that tag. But again, having that documented for your agents to say like, hey, if they want to be off the newsletter, just remove this tag. If you need to add them to it, just add this tag. Again, the beauty of the system is you can do any of those things, but you have to decide one. But ultimately documenting it and bringing it to your team so that they understand, you can create just a short list of tags. You don't have to list every zip code or list all of your tags, but just those key like tags that drive marketing, tags that drive reverse prospecting, or just any sort of follow-up like a smart list or whatnot.
Yeah.
Cool. So sources, this one's a little sticky because you can't just kind of, I mean, you can edit your sources, but a lot of them kind of just push in through lead flow. So let's tell us more about sources, Carolina, kind of what they can do.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, Follow Up Boss is going to automatically detect source when leads come in. So, if you're on your lead flow page, I guess I could share my screen real quick here. Um, you'll see, okay, like here's my realtor.com. We're automatically detecting it. And when a lead comes in through this lead flow, the source is going to be realtor.com. So, we're doing a lot of that automatic detection for you. But at the same time, people can also manually add leads and they can manually add sources. So, it's good to keep that list. Sources again powers kind of your reporting. So if you have a deal that's closed on someone, we have reporting that says, oh, a deal closed for this source. So it's good to still keep like very good hygiene around your sources for that reason. So if you're seeing that your sources are getting out of hand, or you're seeing that agents are like adding tons of like crazy sources, that really is kind of like degrading the reporting that you're going to get down the road. So, back to having like some standard operating procedures, it could be good to say, like, if you're going to add a source, reach out to us, or potentially that could be a rule that, no one's adding sources. We do have a power up that can stop agents from changing the source. So if that's, something you want to lock down a bit more, that's an option. But it is definitely good to stay on top of that source hygiene.
Yeah, and you can also, I'm not necessarily recommending this, but just to kind of mention it, because I've definitely done this with people where, over time they use this website platform, then they move to another one, and then this changes, or sometimes even within those providers, the lead flow names can change. So you can bulk update these potentially. For example, if you say used to be with a different company that potentially sent in a few different types of leads, like a home value lead, and they all created different sources, I've seen a decent number of people. You can filter by that name. Let's just say you had a home value type of source, but you want to consolidate it now. You can sort through that source. You can tag it home value or company name home value, but then change the source back so they're all congruent. So if it's a lead source you haven't used for 2 or 3 years, but you still want to have a little bit of reporting around how many leads did we get, or hey, we just had a closing from somebody that came in 5 years ago, they were that source, you can clean them up. I'm not going to go into a crazy amount of detail here and this for that, but I've done that with a fair number of people, just because you do see that a lot, where people, when you go to all time, you just got a massive list of sources.
Hmm.
One other pro tip: when you're in sources, I still forget this sometimes. When you're in sources, you can click on the lead, I think it's either leads or new leads, and it'll sort by quantity. This is not the best example because it's a demo account that hasn't had many leads come in through the lead flow. But yeah, so you can sort by this, so at least you can view it for the ones that have the most leads down. And then if you click on those, that's actually part of how you could help potentially consolidate them, because now it's
Hmm.
showing you all the leads from that source. So you could add that tag and potentially resource them if that's what you choose to do.
Right. Add the tag here, and then you can update the source here.
While we're screen sharing, you want to show that power up super quick, the lead source
Yeah,
lockdown, just so people know where that is.
absolutely. Um, Here it is. So I don't know if I went a little fast there, but if you click your avatar in the top right and go to power ups, it's going to be towards the bottom here, lead source lockdown. So again, that basically just like locks down that source field.
And again, having a best practice around that, like, hey, if you really need to change a source, contact so and so. Just having that documented, because it's not that we don't want them to ever be able to change it. We just don't want people. I've actually seen several comments lately in the Follow Up Boss Success community, people saying, hey, my agents are changing sources and I don't want them to. And for one,
Mhm.
that should be in their agreement, that is grounds for termination potentially. Um, but here's a mechanical fix for it. So
Yeah,
uh,
and if you have this on, I mean, it can be very straightforward. Like they can reach out to you in a note as an admin, and an admin would still be able to edit this. So, you could always just at mention, you know, whoever, Larry, and say, I need the source changed.
exactly. No, I love that. And I've seen more and more people really using this at mention feature internally. And it's great. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it or haven't used it, one of the great things about it is it does also send an email, depending on your settings or their settings,
Mhm.
with a link right to this lead. So they can
Exactly.
literally see your note, hey, this one needs to be updated, or hey, this happened. Click a button, they're here in the record, they can update it. Or similarly, if they at mention you and say, hey, this was really a Zillow Flex lead, can you change it? It's going to come right to you. You click the button, you can change that. Cool. All right. So appointments, I believe, is next. So The great thing about appointments is you can customize them. The bad thing about appointments is you probably should customize them. So, just determining again what you want to measure. Do you want to measure an initial like buyer consult phone call? Great, add that in. If you don't really care until they become, like under contract or listing appointment, do that accordingly. But it's really a powerful feature that you can do both the appointment type as well as the outcome. So it can help you measure, how many buyer consults have we had this year and how many of them resulted in, assigned buyer brokerage, or how many of them, didn't convert. Did a certain agent convert better than others? You can have all that intel, but you have to be clear about what you want to measure.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'll share my screen again and just this is like what the appointment looks like. So what Lee's referring to here is this type and this outcome. And these are relatively new. They're customizable, but what's in here is kind of like a strong default. But if we're filling these out, where this feeds into is actually in our reporting. And again, this is a test account, but we can only work with the data that we have in here, right? So again, test account, probably not a great one to go with, but we can filter by these outcomes and see like how many of these are we missing? How many of these are no-shows? Like who's getting the most no-shows? How many buyer consultations is Lee having? So this appointments feature is really powerful. The other thing that I wanted to mention about appointments, we'll go back to a lead profile, is that we are syncing with Google Calendar and your Office 365 calendar. So if you are creating appointments over there, if that's more of your workflow, you can still come in here and then use these additional features to add on to those appointments that you've created elsewhere. And then vice versa, anything that you're creating in Follow Up Boss is going to show on that Google Calendar. So if you have that feeding into like your Calendly or something like that, it's a really great way to keep everything super streamlined. So your appointments will also show here in the calendar. So you can use Follow Up Boss or your Google Calendar, pretty seamlessly.
Yeah, it's very great that way. And also, can you look at the filter super quick? Just a good way to show people. So if you really do want to kind of break it down to like, oh, I just want to view these things on my calendar right now because I'm really focused on this, or I want to see how many appointments I have this month or this week or whatever. It's really handy and cool there that you can filter that way. Sometimes it's great to see everything. Sometimes it can be a lot to see everything, especially in the month, in a month view like this.
Mhm.
And with tasks and things potentially mixed in. The other thing I want to hop back to a quick second, just the idea of when you're in reporting, Caroline, the idea of potentially using these for either agent one-on-ones, or even if you're shooting them a Loom video as a one-on-one, like maybe you're not even meeting in person, but maybe you're viewing this and you, oh, look, Jim is really, getting a lot of his buyer consultations to signed buyer brokerage agreements. You can kind of call them out publicly for a win, like, hey, good job. You could also talk to them either privately or publicly on, hey, what are you doing in this appointment? Like, why are you able to take more of your buyer consults to contract than everybody else? And again, just for an in-person one-on-one, just to be able to pull it up and look at things. Hey, good job. You've got this, you've got that. You're setting appointments, you're completing them. Really powerful stuff that allows you to potentially, I probably shouldn't say this, allows you to potentially have a one-on-one with nominal preparation, because it's all in here. And you could just go to it and go, oh, look, you can even save these links. You can save that URL as like a bookmark.
Mhm.
And you could have a bookmark, an email template, whatever you want, as a way to potentially very quickly view each agent's activity, their appointments, and or their deals.
Yeah, and to circle back to our friend, the lead source, that will also be visible here. So as you're going through and like I said before, maybe you're looking for all the no-shows, you can compare that directly to the lead source right here too. So, you can really get a lot of information out of these different reports.
Awesome. Love that. Is there anything else on appointments we need to cover?
I
I think
don't
we're
think so.
good. So let's dig into deals next. I think that's the next logical step.
Yeah. So the deals feature in Follow Up Boss, I guess I'll share my screen again. I keep jumping in and out of the screen share.
It's all right. It's hard. It's great to talk about it theoretically. Sometimes it's kind of hard to
Yeah. So
know if it
this is
makes sense.
this is deals and Follow Up Boss, and like very high level. Deals can be created and then associated to a person or people, and they can be assigned to a team member. So like what most logically happens is you have a lead here, and then you're creating a deal for them here. Um, the deals are broken out into these different pipelines. So we have like a buyer's pipeline and a seller's pipeline. These are also customizable, but these are like, kind of the strong defaults, if you will. And then within each pipeline, you can have multiple stages. So similar to our previous stages, conversation and relationship to leads, it's also good to have meaning for these and for them to be, some sort of standard operating procedure with them. But this is, kind of like a Trello board. If you're familiar with Trello, you can create these deals and then just move them through the pipeline like this. Um, the deal card is pretty straightforward. So you have the name field, which, can be the address. It could be the name of the person. If you're, entering the deal, before there's an address, which is probably most likely, standard deal fields, if you will. And then we have some customizations that are kind of recently available. So if the standard isn't, if you're needing a little bit more, you can always customize these deal cards a bit as well.
Yeah, that's a great ad. I've been excited about those, kind of playing around a little bit with that and the splits feature, and all that. And just for quick reference, agents can see this. I mean, this does exist in their accounts, but they will only see deals that they are on. So bear that in mind. Not necessarily they don't have to create them to see them, but they have to be the team member added. Another thing that a lot of times I encourage people to do, like if you've got staff of some sort, whether it's an actual transaction coordinator or an admin or an assistant, you might consider, my experience, I'll say this a slightly different way. My experience shows that you might want somebody on staff creating and updating these. If you can train and get your agents to do it, that's fantastic. A lot of times I will kind of make a deal with agents and say, hey, if you'll update the stages, at least from lead to something, and then maybe to pending, then if you have the ability to have TC or staff take over from there, you're probably going to get cleaner data around things under contract, actually putting things like splits in here, whereas I wouldn't expect an agent to necessarily calculate and add a split. So again, kind of back to the documentation, just be really clear on, hey, agent, if you do X, Y, and Z, we'll do A, B, and C. And I don't want to get too into it, but you could even do something fancy like an automation to say, like, if the agent changes it to pending stage, notify the appropriate party, or you can make a smart list for that as well. But again, just having that best practice. I hate to kind of beat that dead horse, but that's the overarching topic here is clean data.
Yeah. I love the compromise piece. That makes a lot of sense. And if you do have someone that's kind of like reviewing deals at a very high level under deal reporting, they're going to see a lot more like drilled down information about all deals. And they can see things such as like when the deal entered a particular stage. So you can kind of see like what's been sitting around for a while. Like this deal, well, again, test account, this deal hasn't moved out of pending for 436 days. Like what's going on with this deal? So, this is a really great place for them, for, whoever's kind of managing transactions, or even for an individual agent, because as Lee mentioned, this would be filtered down to just their deals. This is a good way to stay on top of that. And, again, maybe that's what you bake into your, SOPs. We don't want deals that are sitting in the stage for more than X amount of time. That would be a signal that something needs to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Can you sort by those as well? Can you sort by like time and stage? And okay, you can. Nice.
Mhm.
That's great. Yeah, see, if I were like on the admin side or TC side, I'd probably just put something on my calendar like once a month to just say like, hey, just take a quick look at these and, ping the agent or check the file if it's been sitting here for too long. They go, oh, it terminated. Okay, great. Well, let's get it out. Let's do that appropriately. You're still working with them. Just
Mhm.
little touches like that. I think, they're not so little when it's a $5, $10, $20,000 check. So having a system around that definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
What else is here as far as columns go? Are there the same marketing fields here to the right side or?
Yeah, so we also
Yeah,
have
nice.
that contact lead source. So getting back to sources, we have the marketing lead source, which could be slightly different. That field kind of works more behind the scenes, but it has to do with how they got to got to Follow Up Boss. So let's say they came from Google to your website, and then they filled out a form. Your website would be the lead source, but the marketing lead source we would capture as Google. So we have like a little bit of like backtracking with some of that. Like where did they initially come from?
Yeah, that's great. And if you're using something like a Google pay-per-click or Facebook campaigns to drive people here, that data very often will be pulled in there depending on a number of things and how you have it set up. But a lot of times, yeah, that data will show up down to which campaign specifically actually work. So it's pretty cool. You can drill down to a Facebook campaign or a pay-per-click campaign and say, hey, this was on these particular keywords or this particular spend. So it's pretty great stuff there.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so I'm on this marketing report we have here. We're drilled down to the campaign. We can even see how many deals were closed for this particular campaign, how many leads, deals. So you can get really drilled down if we have that very clean data.
Awesome. One more quick thing on deals I want to mention. I know a lot of people are using tools like Sisu or RealScale or Open to Close or various other tools for either actual TC
Hmm.
or just even deeper reporting. And so I just want to mention that a lot of those, sometimes this can be a hairy thing to say, a lot of those are full API integration with Follow Up Boss. So a lot of times, but again, around having a best practice, do we update it in Sisu? Do we update it in Follow Up Boss? Does it pull through? Do we need to update it in both? Just having, again, kind of that best practice. Another thing to bear in mind is, unfortunately, people do come and go, sometimes whether they're agents or staff. And so having that written best practice around this is how we do this. Or if you do it in Follow Up Boss, it updates and Open to Close, or if you do it in RealScale, it also feeds back to Open to Close. Just having those basic touch points down can save you a lot of pain if you're in transition in some way, shape, or form. So
Yeah. And, as you keep adding those building blocks, like things will inevitably become a little bit more complex, but that's okay as long as we have that like documentation around it. So you can build these very powerful systems. That's what Follow Up Boss is awesome with, is we have amazing integration partners. But yeah, as we add on, just make sure to document as we go.
for sure. And I think, it seems obvious, but I'll mention it, using something like a Google Doc where multiple people can potentially have easy access to it. I've been on this and I totally borrowed it from somebody. They might even be on today. More of like a change log type thing. So it's like, that's great. If you want to do this, or if you're going to change this or change something in the lead flow, like maybe throw that on a doc, just so if multiple people have access to this system, you can have some record as well as, oh, I updated this, and I'm not talking about like, oh, updated a deal. I'm talking about like, we changed this action plan, or now the newsletter is powered by a tag. Because again, the bigger you get, the more people that have admin access, the more people that can potentially change things. It's just wise to have that well documented. So, and I think we covered that obviously in depth at the top in the beginning. I think the only thing I would potentially add a little bit is maybe just talk a little more about the training side, because it's
Yeah.
great to have it figured out. It's great to have it documented, but now what? How do you kind of disseminate that to the team? I can say for myself, when I was in this role personally of having to do this, we did weekly meetings, and it seems like a lot. And these were in person. This was many, many, many years ago, but it was very effective. It really kind of created a culture of like, we know what we're doing, or we know who to go to if we don't know, or we know the basics. So if we have a question outside of that, we know, beyond that, we can go ask you. Also creating some on-demand resources. This is not as complicated as people think. Like Loom automatically makes, even the free version, I believe, makes it where you can make a shared folder where you can easily shoot videos of your screen and save them in one place. Say, hey, agents, here's 10 videos on how to update this or the stage definitions or whatever. So Caroline, I'm sure you see a lot of things too. What do you see people doing?
Yeah, when it comes to like on-demand resources, like Follow Up Boss, we've got you. We've got tons of help articles. We have YouTube videos. We have a training center. So definitely rely on the content that is already there. But as Lee said, like there is this whole other side that is like what is specific to your team and your team's expectations. And that relies a bit more on, like internal processes. So use the content that we have available, but like also set those expectations internally. And I liked what you were saying with like the live Google Doc and having kind of like this like live stream of information. I think that's really empowering for agents. Like when they know like that what they're reading is like up to date and they know exactly what to do. I think that it just removes some of that like even like micro frictions that they might have throughout the day. And I think that can be a really, really empowering thing to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I think really, and it's so funny, and I just to kind of bring us back full circle, like, and I'm super guilty of this too. Like, it's so much fun to like, here's a new feature, here's a new that. Let's dig into this. What can we do with this? But ultimately, keeping it really simple and really clear. Um, it can be fancy behind the scenes. You can have all kinds of awesome automations and zaps and integrations with other stuff. Like that's all awesome. But ultimately for the user, it should be pretty simple, pretty straight ahead. I'm actually going to drop a quick link. I shared a document at Level Up in Atlanta that I'll drop in here. It's a really simple like Follow Up Boss handbook doc. So I'll drop that. Let me find it real quick. I'll drop that in and I'll make sure we get it under the recording too. But if anybody has questions, drop them in. We're happy to tackle them real quick. But Caroline, you got any final? I've got it right now. I'll drop it in there. Any kind of final thoughts as we start to wrap?
Yeah, I think just to echo exactly what you just said is like, Follow Up Boss is a very robust system. Like we touched on, we have integrations, we have features, we have this and that, but it's super important to like have for you to have like a just a very strong understanding of like your core building blocks and then disseminate that information to your team. And, the best way to do that is to keep it simple. And just, yeah, I think setting the expectation for agents internally, what's expected of them. And, that also helps them set expectations with their clients. And I think that just, holistically, everyone will be more on the same page and that can be very powerful.
Love that. Yeah, that's so true. Can you drop that link for me, Caroline? I'm not able
Oh
to
yeah.
share it. Good old Zoom, changing it up on us. So yeah, if you guys want to grab that, I'll make sure that oh, it's a different one. It's the docs.google.
There you
Um,
go.
I'll make sure it gets under the recording as well. And when I send out the recording, I'll include it just because I know we kind of threw it out last minute at the end. So if you don't get a chance to snag it now from the chat, I'll make sure it's out there. Or we're not too hard to find. So we'll appreciate you guys joining us, Caroline. It's always a blast to do this with you. Why don't you take us
Oh,
out?
awesome. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.